Let's settle this. Just you and me, brother. The showdown that was always meant to be. Agni Kai!
You're on.
The Last Agni Kai, the fight between Zuko and Azula at the end of the third series of Avatar The Last Airbender, probably my favourite fight scene from anything ever, and to be honest, whilst good fight scenes make for some of the most entertaining moments in cinema and TV, the vast majority of them kind of bore me because, in my opinion, for fight scenes to be truly engaging, they need to be more than just a spectacle in and of itself. You know, the fighting can be flashy and cool to look at, but the sequences also need something more, such as comedy or sadness or fulfilling character development happening naturally during the fight. In the example of The Last Agni Kai, I think there's two key aspects that make this more than just a fight. One being the emotion to the fight itself, and the other being that the existence of this fight at all is the emotional peak and culmination of a lot of what the entire series has been building towards on a few different layers really. And then obviously the fight itself is really well done, and we're going to get into all of that, but let's start with the context behind the fight first, because I think that informs a lot of what we'll see. Whilst Aang and Ozai are technically the main protagonist and antagonist of the series, from an emotional standpoint, it's actually Zuko and Azula. Aang's journey is the more straightforward and predetermined arc. You know, we always knew Aang's story would end with this fight against Ozai, and whilst that makes for epic stakes, it doesn't make for an emotional conclusion so much. Don't get me wrong, there's a surprising depth of emotion to Aang's fight with Ozai, but largely they are two characters who never met during the series. Even to an audience, Ozai was kept a little shrouded in mystery in a way that adds to his sense of threat, but not to the emotion, which is fine because they've got this other story of Zuko and Azula to handle that. So what emotion is there? Well, firstly, there's what an Agni Kai even means for Zuko. It's basically a traditional Fire Nation one-on-one fight for honour. He was first shamed and humiliated as a child when his own father challenged him to one for speaking out of turn, to then also be scarred and sent into exile, and whilst Zuko always saw capturing the Avatar as his hope to restore honour, the idea of winning an Agni Kai against somebody, especially his sister, would partly feel like making up for that previous humiliation. And if I remember right, there's been other moments earlier in the series where he was quite keen to have an Agni Kai, probably for that exact reason. He does challenge his sister at the end of the second series, for example.
Are you going to challenge me to an Agni Kai?
Yes, I challenge you.
No thanks.
And that episode is a crucial turning point in Zuko's journey because it's where he comes to his
crossroads of your destiny. It's time for you to choose. It's time for you to choose good.
His journey from obsessively hunting the Avatar in order to restore his honour and win his father's approval has then had him slowly realising he has more freedom and control over his own life. It's not all dictated by what his dad wants. He is free to choose, either siding with his sister and father or with his uncle and the Avatar. The difficulty is that having the freedom to choose doesn't necessarily mean choosing the right option. He allows his sister to persuade him, manipulate him, and then a large portion of the third series is Zuko grappling with the guilt and consequences of this decision here until reaching such a point he has to break away. I like that he first makes the mistake and then learns based on the consequences, because I think normally stories would just have him pick the right option here. The point is that this fight reflects Zuko correcting that earlier mistake of allowing Azula to persuade him, and demonstrates clearly that where his younger sister has always had some sway over him and ability to manipulate or rile him, not anymore. But more importantly, how this fight serves to conclude the family dynamics at large. Let's start with Zuko, the firstborn who had a close relationship to his mother and her loving approach to parenting before she was banished, just as Zuko himself was later banished. Not as talented a firebender nor as obedient as his father wished him to be, for which he was often shamed, leaving quite a confused message between both parents, one of acceptance for who he is, the other of shame for being weak. Unsurprising that Zuko spends so much of the series conflicted. Then Azula, younger and likely jealous of Zuko as the older brother destined to inherit the throne. She's keen to outperform and show him up, which she could do quite easily as the more naturally talented firebender. She enjoyed both winning her father's approval, but particularly when it meant seeing Zuko disgraced, which felt more immediately satisfying than her mother's messages of love and acceptance. She is taken in by the allure of being her father's favourite child, and it leads her down her father's path of seeking power and dominating over others through fear. A path that led her well to the point she's set to be crowned Fire Lord. Externally, power and fear have sent her on a mostly upwards trajectory, except for 3 problems really. One is that her closest and only friends, May and Ty Lee, both betray her, largely because of May's love for Zuko.
I love Zuko more than I fear you.
The second is that this favoured child who has always enjoyed her father's approval when it's in comparison to her father's disapproval of Zuko, suddenly finds it unfulfilling, because she doesn't really ever actually get Ozai's approval. Crowning her Fire Lord where he becomes Phoenix King is more like a manipulation, a reason to leave her behind where he can lead the assault of his forces alone.
You can't treat me like this! You can't treat me like Zuko!
Ozai has never really been loving to Azula, nor accepted her for who she is, because if he wants to be the man of all power, then even Azula must be kept in a lowly role where he is dominant over her. Azula can never satisfy the demands he sets because she's not meant to, which has felt fine when she compares her position to Zuko's, but Zuko is gone at this point. He's not part of the family. When there's no one else she can compare her hollow level of approval against, suddenly its hollowness becomes clear. And the third issue is that there is no more upwards trajectory at this point. She is to be crowned Fire Lord, that's as high as anything can rise, so what happens then? You know, it's easy to feel in control when you do have a sense of progress. It's no wonder so many businessmen become ensnared by the allure of that upwards trajectory, but once you reach the top, there's only either maintaining that position or losing it, which makes for a very paranoid feel. Azula begins madly banishing anyone and everyone on flimsy delusions that they mean to betray her, so combine that paranoia with the fact her best friends have already betrayed her for Zuko, and that her father's approval appears unfulfilling, and you're left in an incredibly painful, unstable state of mind. All of which she principally blames Zuko for. He's why May entirely betrayed her, his absence is why Ozai's approval feels more hollow, and his very existence represents a threat to the legitimacy of her throne. Emotionally, in every sense, Zuko is her greatest enemy by this point in the series. I mean, you could argue Azula's mother Ursa is technically the greatest enemy, but she's not actually around, and Zuko partly represents Ursa as her favoured son who, after a great struggle, also chose her path of love instead of Ozai and Azula's path of power. So this Agni Kai then half represents that showdown too. Their mother Ursa versus their father Ozai. Love versus power. Azula seeking approval versus Zuko breaking away. Azula's path led her to paranoia, Zuko's to security and self-confidence, and now we have a fight to prove it. So let's actually get into the fight now, shall we? I enjoy firstly that this episode begins with them on their way to Azula. Zuko looking troubled, to which Katara reassures him.
Don't worry, we can take Azula.
I'm not worried about her. I'm worried about Aang. What if he doesn't have the guts to take out my father? What if he loses?
It's interesting because it shows a very calm and secure form of confidence that Zuko has now. He's not afraid of his sister. He was always quite a courageous child, but often in a more brazen and cocky kind of way. Zuko has changed to reach a level of security like his uncle Iroh, who doesn't need to rashly show strength in order to feel confident, but can actually be relaxed within. Anyway, Zuko and Katara arrive just as Azula is about to be crowned in a coronation where, fittingly, nobody is there to watch. Her path of power and fear has left her isolated.
Sorry, but you're not going to become Fire Lord today. I am.
Azula falls into her usual tactics with Zuko, taunt, manipulate and belittle her brother the way she always did as kids.
You're hilarious. And you're going down.
You know, Zuko's grown to not react to her taunts anymore. He doesn't say anything to it here. Although, admittedly, when she pushes again and challenges him to an Agni Kai, he does accept.
The showdown that was always meant to be. Agni Kai!
You're on.
Which is quite a complex point because on the one hand he is reacting to her taunts again here, falling for it in the way he always did when he was younger and less secure. Azula knows she can't beat them both together, so she challenges him to a one-on-one fight. And when I've said a large part of Zuko's development has been about love over power, this decision suggests a failure again. Instead of choosing unity with his friends, he chooses the desire he's always had for an Agni Kai that might make up for his previous humiliating one. But on the other hand, he explains,
There's something off about her. I can't explain it, but she's slipping. And this way, no one else has to get hurt.
which in many ways is weak reasoning, but I don't think it is Zuko really falling for her taunts anymore. He's fully aware of what she's doing, and he's consciously choosing to accept that fight.
She's playing you. She knows she can't take us both, so she's trying to separate us.
I know.
Anyway, Katara accepts his decision and they get to it with another attempt at taunting from Azula.
I'm sorry it has to end this way, brother.
No, you're not.
Which is a brilliant response from Zuko, really, because it's not rising to a taunt, it's just stating fact with some sense of sadness for Azula. He seems to truly pity her now, not envy her power and favour from their dad, but pity how warped she is, how imprisoned beneath Ozai she is, even if she doesn't entirely realise it. In such a simple response, you hear that. And they fight. Azula with slightly unbalanced movement and Zuko with sure footing. Her blue, powerful but very cold coloured flames and Zuko's more warm and loving orange. Azula's making lots of wild and aggressive kicks where Zuko moves very calmly and without much exertion at all really. He shows aggression at points this fight, but he's more defensive than he characteristically has been most of the series, which follows on from this idea of a less cocky and brazen, more confident man within himself. He conserves his energy, and when we remember that firebending is all about the breath, he allows Azula to exhaust herself. This is a much more mature Zuko. We cut away to Aang's fight, but when we return the music kicks in over muffled sound effects. The music that really makes this scene what it is, because as I said in the beginning, a fight scene should be more than just spectacle. It should express something. Here it expresses tragedy through the music, that two siblings were ever drawn to the point where fighting each other like this felt inevitable. Tragedy that they were raised in the circumstances they were. Tragedy that they have both suffered neglect, trauma and manipulation at the hands of their father. Tragedy that where Zuko was able to break free, Azula remains dependent upon this ideology Ozai taught her and his hollow approval to satisfy her needs. Zuko is right to express a faint sense of sadness in his response.
No, you're not.
Because it is tragic to think that Azula isn't sad at all, that she genuinely relishes killing her brother. This is someone who never came to terms with any of the sibling rivalry. As they continue to fight, Azula becomes more wild and aggressive, angry that she isn't winning, and she's left exhausted. Now suddenly Zuko has the chance to press home his advantage, but she fights back again aggressively, circling Zuko where he keeps her at a distance by remaining fixed and firm in his positioning, almost like an earthbender, and then, finally, she's beaten. The muffled sound effects rise up again as she falls to emphasise this defeat. Except this is where Zuko does make his mistake. He can't help himself. The boy that was taunted and bullied so much as a child, finally beating his sister at something, can't help giving in to that old rivalry and taunting her back.
No lightning today? What's the matter? Afraid I'll redirect it?
It's dangerous to taunt someone wild, especially when you're sacrificing your calm, firm approach to do so.
I'll show you lightning!
She aims it instead at Katara. Zuko is forced to jump in and take the hit, not balanced well enough to properly redirect it, therefore leaving him hurt and beaten. It's an important moment for Zuko because where he might have opted for the one-on-one Agni Kai, saving Katara here confirms his path of love over power and honour. It confirms his motivations have changed, and how this whole moment casts the entire setting into a blue tint as well is incredibly effective to press home the sense of Azula's victory and the sadness of this moment. And it's actually not until the next episode where we see the resolution of this fight. We've seen the build, then the fall, and next the triumphant recovery as Katara takes the fight now, beginning with a striking point of view shot of her running to Zuko, thinking only of healing him, but that Azula interrupts it. I think that point of view shot confirms that her motivation is to protect Zuko in this fight, not to destroy Azula. And the Agni Kai is over now. It was over the moment Azula broke the rules to attack Katara, but it means the fight is no longer confined to the arena. Azula takes a domineering high ground where Katara thinks only to hide and find time to think. Time Azula is foolish enough to give her because she feels confident now. Azula feels she's defeated Zuko and is in control of everything, but I guess if there's something it's easy to do with someone who feels complacent and in control, it's trick them. She checks the binds are tight and then immediately runs to heal Zuko.
Thank you, Katara.
I think I'm the one who should be thanking you.
What I like at this point is that neither of them actually say anything to Azula now. She no longer matters. It would be Azula's way to taunt and humiliate them. Their motivation was obviously to defeat her. Sure, it's necessary, but now she is defeated, they're concerned more with each other. Azula's reaction to defeat is probably actually my favourite thing this entire scene. Again, the typical thing would be to have her curse them or make some sort of angry monologue. All she does, however, is scream, then start crying. Which is so much more striking than any words would be right now. Nor does she need to say anything because we understand fully. Her power literally meant everything to her. It was all she had to preserve her sense of worth, the belief that everyone else is weak, not her, and that her strength will lead to a position of control. The experience now of having all that real and imagined power being stripped away, that would be devastating. It's a beautifully humanising moment that reaffirms the tragedy of these two siblings fighting each other, because Azula was just as much a neglected and traumatised child as Zuko was. The only true difference was that she never had Uncle Iroh in the same way to help her heal. It's a fight that should end with a humanising, pained moment of empathy for Azula, not the typical taunting or dramatic "I'll get you next time" stuff. Really, Ozai is used as a place for all that to happen, as his fight finishes with Sokka and Toph mocking him.
Well, look at you, Buster. Now that your firebending's gone, I guess we should call you the Loser Lord.
You know, he offers an outlet to bring back all that kids' cartoon sides of Avatar in a way that doesn't clash with the emotional story, tragedy, and redemption of this fight. I adore Avatar as a show. Please like the video if you enjoyed it, if you want more Avatar related content. Comment your thoughts, what I missed, subscribe. We're getting pretty close to 100,000 now, which just feels crazy when I think how this all started. And I have a lot of plans for new things to come after we reach that milestone. A lot of fun updates, let's say, including a podcast I've already mentioned in passing, so subscribe if you fancy, support me on Patreon if you want, but otherwise, hopefully see you next time. As ever, a special thank you goes to Devin, Kestrel, Arwen, Stephen Legg, Janice McMahon, Luke Hoare, Shichu Kaber, Michael Gallagher, Samara Salsi, Sharikoff2814, Joshua C. Follier, Chad Bramwell, Incomplete Sentience, Emily Tarras and Nicholas Patrick. Thank you.